Welcome back, everybody. And today we're continuing another Arthur journey with Mr. Tad Williams. So let's crack open that screen share and get to it, shall we? Do screen share. Waha. And this is the screen I want. There he is, Mr. Tad Williams. But let's switch over to a more friendly picture because I feel like he's stealing my soul. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Depends what he's going to do with it, I guess. But there we go. All smiles. Like it a lot better. All right. Before Tad Williams became a best-selling fantasy and science fiction author, he made tacos, sold shoes, collected loan payments, managed stores, worked in radio, sang in a theatrical rock band, created technical illustrations, and helped organize engineering information for Apple. So naturally, he went on to write several enormous fantasy novels. Williams did not follow the most conventional path into literature. His route involved retail counters, radio studios, rehearsal rooms, computer systems, difficult customers, and at least one band comfortable using fire and explosions during performances. I like this man. That background may help explain why his fictional worlds feel so large and inhabited. His stories contain rulers, warriors, monsters, and ancient mysteries, but they also contain workers, artists, technicians, bureaucrats, families, and ordinary people trying to understand systems much larger than themselves. I do like it when it's not super high level and the reader, which would be me in most cases, is when I say reader, can relate. The common person. I like it a lot. So, who is Tad Williams? How did such an unusual collection of jobs lead to a writing career? And how did a former shoe salesman and rock singer become one of the most influential figures in modern fantasy? Well, back in his early days, he was born Mr. Robert Paul Williams on March 14th, 1957, in San Jose, California, and grew up largely in Palo Alto. The name Tad, not Ted, but Tad, began as a childhood nickname. His mother borrowed it from the tadpole characters in Walt Kelly's comic strip Pogo, and it remained with him throughout his life. Williams has described his family as financially modest but strongly supportive of creativity. His mother made homemade Halloween costumes, invented songs, and encouraged the imaginations of Williams and his brothers. Books became important to him at an early age. He encountered fantasy through writers such as E. Nesbitt and Kenneth Grahame, and he read The Lord of the Rings when he was around 11 years old. That experience clearly stayed with him. Williams would eventually become interested not only in adventure, magic, and mythology, but also in the stories that society tells about themselves. His fiction frequently asks who controls history, what legends leave out, and whether the supposed villains might have their own versions of events. Unlike many of his friends, Williams did not immediately leave high school for college. Instead, he decided to support himself while pursuing his creative interest independently. That choice gave him practical experience, although not always the kind a person would deliberately request. So, now we're going to go into the many jobs of Tad Williams. So, Williams pretty much stacked titles, made tacos and burritos, sold shoes, sold insurance, collected loan payments, worked in retail management, and eventually managed a branch of savings and loan institutions. It is an impressive resume, particularly if the goal was to avoid doing the same thing twice. He also worked in an art supply store and used drawing abilities in commercial and technical art. At one point, he reportedly produced illustrations for military manuals. That required work does need accuracy, patience, and the ability to make complicated information understandable. Those skills would later prove useful when presenting readers with large fictional histories, multiple cultures, and cast of characters substantial enough to require careful attention. William has spoken humorously about some of his retail experience. One memorable incident involved an angry customer striking him with a sale slipper. Haha, attack by shoe. It was not particularly formidable weapon, but it was probably an effective lesson in the unpredictability of the public. Um, Williams was also involved in theater, music, and radio. He worked as a disc jockey and music director at KFJC a college radio station in San Francisco Bay Area. Radio gave him experience with voice, performance, pacing, and the difficult task of holding the audience attention when they are free to leave at any moment. That last skill is useful for any writer, particularly one whose novels occasionally require reinforced shelving. Music was another major part of his early creative life. Williams sang in a rock band called Idiot. Yep, Idiot. The name was deliberate. The band developed a theatrical identity with performances that could include costumes, comedy, unusual songs, fire, and occasional explosions. Sometimes the members appeared as an entirely different fictional band before returning for an encore as themselves. Williams has spoken affectionately about the experience, but has also described the practical frustrations of working in a group. A band depends on several people arriving on time, learning their parts, bringing their equipment, and remaining committed. Yes, humans fail. Bad humans. Writing offered fewer moving parts. A drummer could miss a rehearsal, a venue could cancel performance, a bandmate could leave. A blank page, by comparison, was extremely dependable. That independence was one reason Williams began taking fiction more seriously. And we're going to take a quick coffee break before we go into his Apple technology and interactive media phase. You're allowed to drink coffee too, or tea if you're a tea person. I'll allow it. One of Williams' final conventional jobs was at Apple Computer. Yes, that Apple. From approximately 1987 through 1990, he worked as a technical writer in Apple's knowledge engineering department. His job involved taking information created by engineers and turning it into organized, searchable material that other people could understand and use. Very important job. Practical terms, he translated technical language into readable language. This placed Williams close to the developing worlds of personal computing, digital information, and electronic communication. He later became involved with an interactive media company called Telemorphics, with an X at the end. The company produced M. Jack Steckel's 21st Century Vaudeville, an experimental television program in the Bay Area. Viewers could call in or submit images that might become part of the program itself. Today, audience participation through screens and networks feels ordinary, but at the time, it was unusual enough to seem futuristic. These experiences exposed Williams to questions that would later become important in his fiction. How do people interact through technology? What happens when a constructed environment begins to feel real? How does identity change when people can present themselves through screens, avatars, or invented personalities? And who controls the systems where all of this takes place? Those questions would become especially relevant to Otherland. So, let's go into the novels. Williams began concentrating seriously on fiction while he was still in his 20s. His first completed novel grew partly from watching cats and wondering what kind of mythology they might create for themselves. The result was Tailchaser's Song, an epic fantasy told from the perspective of cats. Don't worry, we're going to do a round of let's show the covers of the books on the website, and also there'll be links down in the description below for you to pursue at your leisure. Most people observe a cat staring at an empty corner and assume it has noticed an insect. Williams imagined a civilization. He wrote much of the novel at night while continuing to work ordinary jobs. Getting the manuscript notice required persistence and a small amount of creative improvisation. Williams has admitted that he contacted the publishers and claimed his own copyright of the manuscript had been destroyed in a flood. He then asked whether the company could produce a replacement from the copy he had submitted. His hope was that someone would have to locate the manuscript and perhaps begin reading it. This is not standard publishing advice. It was, however, memorable. Daw Books eventually purchased Tailchaser's Song, and the novel was published in 1985. It began Williams' long relationship with the publisher and officially launched his writing career. Williams' major breakthrough came with Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, beginning with the Dragonbone Chair in 1988. The trilogy continued with Stone of Farewell and concluded to Green Angel Tower. The final volume became so large that its paperback edition was divided into two parts. At some point, even the binding had limitations. At the broadest and safest level, the series takes place in a fantasy world of Osten, Ard, and follows characters caught in a conflict involving political instability, competing cultures, inherited grievances, and differing versions of history. Books begin with recognizable elements of traditional epic fantasy, but Williams gradually complicates them. Heroes can misunderstand the past. Legends may omit inconvenient details. Enemies have more complicated motives than expected. And the stories a society tells about itself may bear only passing resemblance to what actually happened. The trilogy became very highly influential. George R. R. Martin has discussed the Dragonbone Chair as one of the works that showed him epic fantasy could support political complexity, moral uncertainty, and large cast he wanted to explore in Song of Ice and Fire. Williams' influence has also been acknowledged by writers such as Patrick Rothfuss and Christopher Paolini. Even readers who have never encountered Tad Williams directly may have read fantasy shaped by what he helped make possible. Otherland, and hey, I have this book. It's what we're going to be reading in book club. Don't worry, I tried to make this section spoiler free for my book club members that are watching it, but it's a big book, and I believe this is just the first part of it, even though it is titled Otherland. Mere 800 pages. Fun times. I like big books. So, as I mentioned, for our book club, the most immediately relevant part of Williams' career is Otherland. The series consists of 4 novels: City of Golden Shadow, River of Blue Fire, Mountain of Black Grass, and Sea of Silver Light. Because we will be reading the series ourselves, I want to keep this description deliberately spoiler-free. I will not explain the central mysteries, reveal character outcomes, or compress several thousand pages of suspense into a convenient summary. Maybe after we read it, because spoilers. As its broadest level, Otherland takes place in a future where advanced virtual reality has become a major part of everyday life. But you said no spoilers. It's on the back of the cover. I'm good. I promise you. The story brings together a large and international diverse cast of characters whose lives become connected through an enormous network of artificial environments. This structure allows Williams to move through different settings, genres, myths, and storytelling traditions while still building one connective narrative. He's very good at scale. Williams decided to work on a larger scale, as I mentioned, because his experience at Apple and in interactive media gave him a practical background for imagining digital systems. But Otherland is not simply a story about computers or an attempt to predict future technology. It's also concerned with identity, morality, inequality, family, power, and the way human beings use stories to understand their lives. The series asks what happens when an artificial world becomes emotionally meaningful, explores what can happen when powerful people control things, and it examines the uncertain boundary between direct experience and experiences shaped through technology. And I still think that's relevant today in 2026. So these concerns may sound especially current, as I just mentioned, but Williams began publishing the series in the 90s, way on back. Anybody remember the 90s besides me? Me? Oh, okay. I'll go back to my corner, kids. When loading a single image online could still require patience and personal resolve. And the internet made angry pterodactyl noises when you turned it on. It was a beautiful time. That is about as far as I want to go before the reading begins. And if you're interested in joining us, link for the book club down below, as well as the free Discord. Haha, that was a self-plug. I did it. Moving on. The scale, mysteries, characters, and unexpected turns of Otherland are better discovered through the books themselves. There are also 4 substantial volumes, so there will be no shortage of material for discussion once we're safely beyond the spoiler line. Other notable works. After Otherland, Williams continued moving among epic fantasy, science fiction, urban fantasy, and fiction for younger readers. His 4-volume Shadowmarch series centers on Fantasy Kingdom, divided by political conflict and bordered by mysterious forces its inhabitants do not fully understand. The series explores family responsibility, cultural misunderstandings, fear, and the consequences of treating another society as unknowable or less than human. Williams also wrote The War of the Flowers, a standalone fantasy that places a modern character inside a dangerous and political, complicated fairy world. Damn fairies and their worlds that are dangerous. And this goes on back to Arthurian legends, so on point. This is not a decorative fairyland populated entirely by helpful creatures. Williams imagines a society shaped by industry, class, social conflict, and political power. His Bobby Dollar series begins with The Dirty Streets of Heaven. Love that name. Uh, for a title. It's a great title. These books combine urban fantasy, supernatural mystery, hard-boiled detective fiction, and noir. Or noir, depending on how you want to pronounce it. They are faster, sharper, and often more openly humorous than his large epic fantasies. Williams also returned to Osten-Ard decades after completing Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. His later works in that world include The Heart of What Was Lost, Brothers of the Wind, and the multi-volume series The Last King of Osten-Ard. These books examine what happens after the apparent ending of an epic conflict. Victories do not erase history, old enemies do not disappear because the final chapter has ended, and the next generation must live with a decision made by people who have since become legends, status, or uncomfortable footnotes. So, what about his personal life, Johnny? Well, he is married. He does have a family, and who he's married to, her name is Deborah Beale. And I know you've been staring at this gentleman for quite a while, but oh, there they are together on Locust Magazine. So let's look at some more photos of her. I think that's an actual camera. It might be a webcam. I'm not sure. There's them chilling on the couch. He's reading a book. She's drinking a little something something. There they are posing, and she has some awesome earrings right there. He has earrings as well. Forgot about that. One of the few authors, male authors, that have earrings like that. And let's see here. So, yes. Well, let's go back to the Locust magazine. I think that's the best one. Even though they kind of look like, do we have to do this? That's kind of funny. From 2009. Anyway. He's worked as an editor of adult and children's books in London. I'm sorry, she has worked as a former uh, editor of adult and children's books in London. She is a former publishing professional. The couple lives in Santa Cruz Mountains of Northern California. Williams' official biography describes their home as suitably strange and beautiful. That seems appropriate for a creator of Osten-Ard and Otherland. Descriptions of the household have included children, cats, dogs, reptiles, insects, and the banana slugs native to the region. The line between family and home and small wildlife preserve may be mostly administrative. Beale has also collaborated directly with Williams. Together, they recreated The Ordinary Farm Adventures, a young adult fantasy series involving a mysterious farm connected to creatures believed to be extinct or mythological. The published books are The Dragons of Ordinary Farm and The Secrets of Ordinary Farm. Williams generally keeps the private lives of his children outside the public spotlight, so I will respect this and not show photos of his children. What he does share, he presents a household shaped by creativity, collaboration, animals, and reasonable amount of eccentricity. So, has he won any awards or been recognized for anything, you may ask? And the answer is yes. Coffee break. So in 2004, Corine International Book Prize for the Otherland series in the Future category. The award recognized the series for its imaginative treatment of virtual reality and developing communication technologies. Tailchaser song, the one about the cats, helped make Williams a finalist for the 1986 John W. Campbell Award for Best New Writer, now known as the Outstanding Award for Best New Writer. The novel was also a finalist for the William L. Crawford Fantasy Award. Several of Williamson's works have appeared in Locus Awards voting, and to Green Angel Tower placed third in the fantasy novel category in 1994. Awards, however, tell only part of the story. Williams' larger importance probably comes from his influence on later fantasy writers, and from the way he helped expand what epic fantasy could accomplish. So he's one of the forerunners in multi-layered or complexity kind of things that writers that are producing works today that you're probably reading have been influenced by him directly or indirectly. His novels basically combine large-scale adventure with questions about history, technology, cultural memory, identity, family, inequality, and political power. These are very important questions. These are very modern, important questions, I think. And they're questions to think about your and my future. He helped build a bridge between the traditional epic fantasy associated with Tolkien's successors and the more politically complex, psychologically grounded fantasy that became increasingly prominent in later decades. He also demonstrated that readers would follow an author through an enormous story, provided the world was compelling and the furniture sufficiently sturdy. So, yes, big books. They need to be engaging, or else you'll just stop reading about halfway through because it's big. Um, so I think that is important when it comes to big books. It has to be engaging pretty much all the way through. So, in closing, Tad Williams' early jobs were not meaningless detours from his writing career. In many ways, they were his education. Radio taught him voice, timing and pacing. Retail and loan collection exposed him to people under pressure. Theater and music taught him performance, collaboration, and the complications of depending on a drummer. Technical illustrations required accuracy and patience. Apple, the company, introduced him to digital systems and the organization of information. Uh, Interactive media encouraged him to think about technology, participation, and constructed identity. All of those experiences eventually found their way, directly or indirectly, into his fiction. The young man who once made tacos, sold shoes, managed a savings and loans branch, and sang in a band called Idiot, eventually became the creator of Austenard, Otherland, Shadowmarch, Bobby Dollar, and several other imaginary worlds. His career is a reminder that writers do not always emerge from literary programs, university, or offices lined with first editions. Sometimes they emerge from radio stations, retail counters, rehearsal rooms, computer companies, and kitchens where someone is writing a novel late at night after finishing a shift. And as we begin reading Otherland, that background gives us another way to understand the person who created it. Tad Williams is not simply a fantasy author, he's an artist, performer, technician, observer, and lifelong builder of worlds. He's also proof that tacos, slippers, rock music, Apple computers, imaginary cats, and several thousand-page novels can somehow form one coherent career. It makes considerably more sense once you have met Tad Williams. So let me stop the screen share, and as promised, we're going to go through some of the books I mentioned. And again, links will be down in the description for those that want to peruse more. Can I find the share screen button? It's not like I haven't done this before. There we go, and share. Da 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 da. All right, so this is volume 1 of the Otherland series, City of Golden Shadow. It is the Otherland. Tailchasers, that funny book about cats, if you didn't make the connection via the cover. The Dragonbone Chair, got a cool little sword thingy. The Stone of Farewell, another cool sword thingy. And another cool sword thingy coming from To Green Angel Part 1. Or, I'm sorry, To Green Angel Tower Part 1. And here's Part 2. Here is the continuation of Otherland, River of Blue Fire. So, Book 2. Mountain of Black Glass, number 3 in the series. Cool photo. And Sea of Silver Light, the final volume in the Otherland series. And then we have Shadowmarch, The War of Flowers, The Dirty Streets of Heaven. Again, cool title. Appreciate the halo there and the feather. The Heart of What Was Lost, Brothers of the Wind, The Witchwood Crown. I like the tower. It's like it's got eyes. Very spooky. The Dragons of the Ordinary Farm. This is one he does with his wife. And cool little dragon rider there. And The Secrets of Ordinary Farm by him and his wife again. I love this cover. This would be a great YA cover. It is for YA, so fantastic. So, step out of that screen share. So that's Tad Williams. Yay. Again, we're starting the book, I believe, on Thursday. this book here. Very thick book. Wow. Should be a fun little read. If you're interested in joining us, well, there'll be the Patreon link down in the description below for you to click on. Feel free to join us in our public Discord. And yep, all the books will also be down in this description as well. Have I forgotten anything? Catchphrase. So as always, keep on booking on.